Hey there, I'm Tracy Spear, speaker, author, founder of Exceptional Leaders Lab, and head cheerleader for anyone wanting to play bigger. This week, my guest is Eryn O'Brien, and she's definitely playing bigger, as you will hear in the interview. She is a graduate of the University of Minnesota. She was a consultant, started her career at Corn Ferry, which I think that was named something else, if I remember right, but it's the now Corn Ferry. Managed worldwide leadership assessment for American Express, was the chief learning officer at the Bank of America, senior vice president of global talent and organizational effectiveness for Bristol Myers Squibb, and is currently the vice president of global talent and inclusion for Eastman Chemical Company. So big jobs. I love this, Eryn, when I read it. Her passion is developing and executing data-driven strategies that unlock the full potential in people and teams to transform cultures and build capabilities that drive sustainable business growth. Oh, I'm so excited. Come on in. My guest this week, Eryn O'Brien.
Hey, Tracy, it's great to be here with you today.
Thank you. You are a hostage in me. You're like, no, I don't want to do this. I was like, you have to do this. You have to do this because you've had some big shifts as evidenced by just listening to and reading your bio. But you also had a shift. I'm not going to start with the one I want to talk about. I'm going to make the listeners wait a bit. But you did something this summer that just, I want to hear all about it. But before we get there, when this is called Shift Out Loud and you look back on some of those shifts that you made, let's talk a little bit. Well, like what comes to mind for you? Like the first time you remember thinking, wow, that was a shift and it changed everything. What would be on the list?
Hmm. Well, gosh, I've certainly had a number of shifts in my career when you think about going from different companies and being involved in different kinds of things. And I guess when I think back, I've been very fortunate. Some shifts were done to me, and some shifts are ones that I initiated. But I think what's taught me is it's just so important to reinvent yourself all the time. It's very easy to kind of, when I think back when I was in college and graduate school, I had this plan of I'm going to come in and I'm going to do these things and I'm going to have a career and then I'm going to end it and then I'm going to do some other things. And I probably envisioned it being more static than it turned out to be. And I'm so glad I was wrong.
Mm.
Because when I think about some of the big shifts, um, it may have been the company I was in going through a big acquisition, for example. And I remember one shift at that time in my career, and um, I knew what job I was going to go to as a result of this acquisition. In fact, I was so confident what job I was going to go to as a result of of this transition. I actually started networking with the stakeholders that would be part of my new job.
Okay.
And my boss called me and said, "Hey, Erin, I just want you to know we're actually putting you in this role over here."
Oh,
And I said, "Really?" I said, I think you're on the wrong line on your communication plan because that job's going to this other person. My job is this one." And he said, "No, no, no, I want you to go to that one." And I said, but Jim was his name. I said, "Jim," I said, "I don't know anything about that business." It was actually when I was moving into the investment banking business. I said, "I know nothing about that business. Um, what I do know is that the people in it tend to be kind of jerks. And for what I do around talent and culture, they could care less." And he said, "That's exactly why I'm putting you in this role
nice.
because it's an opportunity for you to learn." He goes, "If I put you in that other job, you'll do great in it because you already know it. But I want you to go do this because it is something you don't know. It's going to push and challenge you. You've got the technical skills to do it." He goes, "But it's going to push and challenge you around business acumen in a different way. And it's going to push and challenge you around how you influence in ways completely different than you've done before. And if you want to continue to grow in your career with the way you've said, that's important for you to do."
Oh my
So
God. How did you feel in that moment? Did you feel duped? Did you feel inspired? What was your feeling?
I think at first I was mad.
Yeah.
I was like, "Really? This is just, I actually felt like I was being set up to fail.
Interesting.
Um, because I just could not imagine how I was going to be, because I've been successful in what I had been doing. And the people I had been engaging with for the new job that I was supposed to have were really excited for me to come on board to work with them. And I thought, I got to start from scratch. And I just, oh, I mean, it just felt
Yeah.
Um, but what I realized from that was a couple things. One was it was the right thing because I wouldn't have been too comfortable. I wouldn't have learned because it did push me way out of my comfort zone. Uh, and I had to really think differently about how I did everything. Again, not the technical skills, that was fine, but the way I built relationships, the way I engaged, the way I influenced, the way uh, just everything I need to do differently. And that was important for me not to become, very narrow in my career. And I think it set me up well for the responsibilities I've had since then. The other thing it really taught me was the importance of relying on other people because there was no way I could have done that shift without other people. And certainly my boss was super supportive. Again, I was very fortunate that I had somebody who believed in me, saw this as a right opportunity and kind of pushed me to do something I wouldn't have naturally done. And then supported me every step of the way. Uh, but it was also pushing me. He didn't know a lot about this business either. So it really was pushing me to think about how do I form allies with what kind of people to learn what I need to know and to be able to test assumptions and get insights and lean on others to do things that I normally would have done. I mean, it just was one of those real pivotal points in my career that I would have never chosen, but I'm very thankful because I think I would not be have had the opportunities I've had since then without that
Listen, when you said that you felt like it was, happening to you, and now you look back and go, that was definitely happening for you.
one.
But in that moment, I think a lot of people shrink in that moment and go and say, no, no, I'm not going to be as successful in that. And so, this is the job I really wanted. People get entrenched in that so that you
Hmm.
pivot off of that. And, even feeling in the moment like, this is not going to work, but to
Hmm.
trust that process.
Yeah.
I do know you well enough to know that trusting that process is something that you're pretty good at. Like you are like, okay, once you're on board, was that developed or have you always been like that?
I mean, I think I've always felt like I've had a good sense of resiliency, right? I like things that are hard. And although we coach to not say it's because they're hard, but it is. I do like kind of leaning into things because if you kind of go back to what you have in my intro, right? I love to unleash potential in people and teams, and the piece I would add on to that is that they don't even see as possible.
Mm.
And so I do think it's I've always sort of been sort of wired that way a bit to kind of just throw myself into things. Um, but at the same time, I do think it's important to um, kind of step back and check yourself and say, so where do I go from here? Um, how do I how do I make the most of this opportunity? I think about when I do career conversations with folks, which I love mentoring other people and having opportunities to mentor and coach. Join people on their journey for their careers. One of the things I say when I reflect on my own career is um, I was probably the worst example of career planning and the best example of career management. Although I wouldn't realize it at the time. Again, it's kind of looking back because a lot of the things I got involved in, again, sometimes by circumstance, probably more often by circumstance than I like to admit, but sometimes by choice is well, how am I going to learn from this? What can I learn from this situation? What can I learn from this circumstance? I may learn that it's something I never want to do again, and that's okay too. But whatever circumstance I'm in, I try to seek what can I learn from this that I can take forward, even if it's that particular assignment or that particular task or that particular kind of responsibility is something I don't want to do. It's that learning orientation. That's let's just be curious. Um, you know, don't be a victim of your circumstance, but say, well, what can I do in this? This is the hand I've been dealt. What can I do here? What can I influence? What can I try? Um, Sometimes I'll succeed, sometimes I'll fail, but what can I learn and then take forward?
That soundbite there. Don't be a victim of what happens.
Mm.
Lean in, be curious. I love that. I just wanted to say that again. I'll make sure you heard that. You have a super big job right now as the vice president of global talent and inclusion for Eastman Chemical Company. And in that job, tell us a little bit about when you say some of the things that bring you joy. What makes you love this job that you have right
So, I think there's several things, right? So, one, when I think about the organization that I'm in, it's got a phenomenal purpose. And, I've worked with other companies that had purpose. That's been an important piece. When I think about kind of what drives me is being part of things that have purpose and meaning. And so when I think about the work that we're doing as a company around, I say we're the company that a lot of people don't know because we're a B2B, but we're the things you use every day. We're what makes them better and safer. And so to make the world a better, safer place is a pretty cool thing. So I think the business strategy is actually a lot of fun. But maybe even more importantly, it's the ability to do things with some pretty amazing people. And I think, trying to solve some of the world's most complex problems when you're doing it with people that you really like and trust can be a whole lot of fun. Doesn't mean it's easy, right? So we're trying to take, an over 100-year-old company and transform it to operating in some new ways. There's certainly some challenging market conditions out there. But in my role, it really feeds what my passion is because what our team's responsible for is finding phenomenal people from all around the world, attracting them into Eastman, and then setting them up to be wildly successful where they can perform, grow, and thrive. And what better job is there than that for someone who likes doing the things that I like doing? And I just, again, it comes back to be able to unleash potential in people in the organization to do really important things in ways that some others may say, "Gosh, I'm not sure how we're going to get there," but you know what? We're going to find a path.
I've been in some of my favorite meetings in my career with you sitting there. I want to say this to you. So, you and I met through Signature, Carol Seymour's organization. I'm on the faculty for them. And I've actually been all around the world with you, like in some of those rooms. And I want to echo one thing you said. It's the people that I'm meeting at Eastman are a reflection of your desire to bring in the right people and cultivate the talent and all that. Well done, A plus. I love people. I
Thank you.
love them. They come in, they come wanting to kind of understand what's about to happen, but yet after I get the nicest notes, I get
Mm,
the nicest messages that people are using the opportunity that they have at the organization to be better. And I don't know, it just like when I look at all of the clients that
mhm.
we have, I think, where would I want to work? I don't want to go back to the corporate America. Where would I want to go? You all are I mean, at the top of the list. So I love the culture that you all are creating. And,
Well, I
and
appreciate that, but I do think it's also, recognizing I truly believe most people show up every day wanting to do their best. Uh, there's very few people I've run into in my career that I think they've shown up and go, okay, who can I mess up to, right? Or what mistake can I make, or who can I really piss off today? I mean, I don't think most people show up every day thinking that. Um, but I do think sometimes we struggle as leaders, as organizations, to say, so what do we do to really bring out the best in everyone? And that takes time and effort, human resources, talent assets. I mean, I don't like those terms, right? Because it sort of takes the human out of that. And so when you think about the whole people that we bring into our company, or frankly, any company I've been a part of, you think about, we're whole people. And how do we really tap into what drives each person? And then you know, my role is really a facilitator, right? I can't make people do things. I can't force people to do things. I don't, I'm not on the manufacturing line. I'm not creating, physical things, right? It's all, influencing and facilitating and coaching. Um, but I think we all have an opportunity to do that, wherever role we are in the organization to say, hey, how can I bring out the best in you? You
yeah.
know, because when we do that, we all succeed.
I agree with you completely. And yet, there are a lot of organizations that aren't putting the emphasis on this piece that your organization is and you specifically are doing. And yet, I think in this climate, it's never been required more. What do you think?
Mhm. Oh, you know, it's probably always been true, right? Um, and I think what's happened over the last couple of years with the pandemic is, a lot of people are stepping back and really challenging assumptions and saying, hey, you know, we were forced during the pandemic to create a certain level of flexibility because just the world it required us that more people work from home, people juggling multiple priorities, trying to deal with lots of things going on. You know, to go back to what I did before. I mean, who wants to go backwards on anything anyways, but to go back to what that was, why would I do that? Right. And the, starting to, again, and I've seen this happen in other kind of big things in the world. I've worked for over 25 years now. So I've seen, different kinds of things happen, with 9/11, with the financial crisis, with the pandemic, those kinds of things I think really do cause people, they're big life events that cause, people as it's sort of a collective to step back and really challenge what's important to me.
Yeah.
And, and so what's happening now in the world of work, it's certainly shifted from organizations being in control to the talent being in control. And we may say we don't like that. We don't want that. I think the organizations that are going to win and have a talented leader are ones who are going to say, let's embrace that. So how do we use that um, for good? Because if I've got great, high performing, engaged employees who are thriving, they're going to do better for my company because they're going to have the energy and the motivation and the excitement to go solve some of those complex problems and contribute, in ways different than they would otherwise. Um, I think it's probably a good pivot, but it's going to be one that I think organizations, my own included, are going to say, "Wow, we're going to have to really challenge some of our assumptions and do some things differently." And that's hard when you've got, decades of ways of operating to overcome.
Are you all final at this point on your work life? I'm sorry, your virtual and physical, like or is it still evolving? Like,
I think all companies are still evolving. Even companies that are declaring that they found the answer, I would challenge a year from now. I bet they're in a different place because I think we're trying to figure out what that means. Because I really wrestle anytime anybody says it's, all or none anything, right? Everybody in the office, everybody work remote. I mean, there's different pros and cons and challenges and complexities. Certainly some roles are more remote ready than others. And I do think we've got to challenge ourselves and say, what does that mean? But then recognize, there's still challenges. How do you develop people? How do you build a culture? How do you do all the things that happen, what I call in the gray space around the water cooler, when you're working very differently? And again, we're a global company. Lots of global companies um, haven't figured this out even before the pandemic, right? The whole sort of, out of sight, out of mind. Corporate headquarters, people always get more opportunities and advantages than those in the remote, even office locations. It's just putting that more to the forefront that we're going to have to figure out what this means. The good news is I think technology has advanced to help us, but that's not the only answer. It's going to put a lot more pressure on both leaders and employees to think very differently. How do I build relationships? How do I engage? How do I stay connected in the most meaningful ways? That I don't think anybody's really figured out fully yet.
the seat that I sit in, it seems like, and I'll ask your opinion, that people are more open to being in that conversation, obviously because of the pandemic, but more specifically to what you just said, being more open to what do I have to do to create connection. And yet we could argue that that would have been a really good strategy 10 years ago. Yet pandemic forced a behavior in that way. And I would imagine that as we watch leaders get more open to that idea and that your job just continues to get bigger and bigger because it creates, more opportunity for you. Is that true?
I think, yeah. There's notion that there's a land of opportunity out there, right? There's still shortage of challenges to us to address, right? So take an example of people. Let's figure that we can find this hybrid, more remote ready role people can do in very different ways. Well, one of the that's great because it supports flexibility, which is a reflection of more inclusive culture in many ways. Because I'm now recognizing that people can work in lots of different kinds of ways, and we support that. That's a positive. The challenge in that is, well, okay, now I need to be really intentional about how I'm forming relationships and connections and who I'm thinking about, who I'm investing in, who I'm promoting, who I'm giving key assignments to. And left to our own devices, humans tend to gravitate towards people who are like them. So, while in the office setting, we've been able to almost force interaction, force is maybe too strong a word, but drive interaction, more intentionally to create physical connections between people who would naturally connect. How we do that in a virtual world? Again, there's some things that will probably work to increase that, and there's going to be some things, some barriers that'll work against that. So That's the fun thing about working with people. We're dynamic and we change and we evolve. And once we think we got it figured out, then we're going to change and evolve again. And it's going to create a whole new set of questions. But that's I think what makes this fun is that continually evolving, looking at what else, what's next, what's possible, where do we go from here? I think that's what makes, frankly, working with people fun.
Well, speaking of fun, that's a nice segue into the question I've been dying to ask you. And one of the things I really want to talk about today is let's tell the listeners what you did this year. I don't even want to. I'm just gonna like let you. What created it? What would just kind of walk us through what has happened for you this year?
Sure, sure. So, as we were talking before, so I've been in uh, talent and inclusion and development and kind of roles for over 25 years, and it's been a great ride. I've had lots of phenomenal experiences. I've learned a ton. I've worked with some great organizations and several great people, and so there's been a lot of real positives in that. But like many during the pandemic, I was kind of stepping back and going, hmm, so where am I? What do I need to do? Um, I was, kind of thinking about, that whole concept of how do I learn and grow and push and what does that mean and what does that look like? Um, I was starting to question myself to saying, have I stopped being bold? I mean, I've been doing this for a long time. Have I stopped being bold? Have I stopped learning at the pace that I could be or should be? Um, do I need to do something different to do that? And it was, I'd had some personal health issues. I had some things going on in my family. I kind of, again, just lots of things sort of kind of rolling around where I just said, I just feel like I just need to like take a step back and kind of think differently. So one of the natural questions is, why do you need a new job? Right. That's what I've done at other points in my career. Right. But it's like, no, I really like the company I'm in. I really like the work that I'm doing here. I don't think it's about the job. I think it's about I just need to kind of do sort of a reset and kind of just check myself on am I still bold? Um, and so I said, okay, so what I need to do, I'm going to take some time off and I want to do something that is where I'm going as far away physically from where I am today. Currently, I live in East Tennessee in the United States. So I want to go as far away physically from where I am today to somewhere I know nothing about, to do something I know nothing about, um, and just see what happens.
That is a
And
shift
it
out
has,
loud. That's the
you know,
definition of shift out loud.
and it has some sense of purpose because I'm not someone who just wants to go sit on a beach. I'd be bored. I mean, it's just that's not kind of how I'm wired. I'm very purpose driven, and so I wanted to something that felt like it made a difference as well. And so, long story short, I started thinking about volunteerism, and I found an organization that's connected to the UN sustainability goals, and called GBI, and they've got different bases all around the world that are focused on different sustainability goals. And so they have some on women's empowerment. So that's kind of too close to what I do. And there's some on it, and education in third world countries. I'm like, well, I'm responsible for development education. That's still kind of similar to what I do. There's some focused around water conservation. Well, then they had a couple bases that were focused on wildlife conservation. And I said, well, always been someone who loves animals. That's very different than what I do today. I know nothing about this. And when I looked at where the bases were, they had one in South Africa. I said, that's about as far around the world as I can imagine going. Um, and so I did probably too little research. I did a little bit of research to see, did they seem like a viable organization? Yep. Fortunately, it worked out to be okay. But that's what I ended up doing is I took a 3-month internship working um, on a game reserve in South Africa um, as a wildlife conservation research intern. And intern is a key word here for a couple reasons. One is as an internship, it meant I was actually going to learn more than just volunteer. So I actually had to take classes before I left. There was actually things I had to learn and tests I had to pass. So I was there, certain kind of responsibilities because it was a real internship. The other thing when you think about internship, when in people's lives that they tend to do their internships, usually when they're in college or right as they finish college before they go on to their career. And so, most of the people who are doing these kind of things tend to be in their 20s. I am not in my 20s. We won't say exactly how far out of my 20s, but it's been a while. And so I also knew that was going to be an additional uh, challenge for me is gosh, I'm doing something at a stage that's very different than everybody else. What is that going to mean, and how's that going to work? So, anyways, so that's what I did. A wildlife conservation research internship on a game reserve in South.
That you say that so casually. That is, I mean, that shift to say, wow, first of all, you have an organization that is supporting you to take care of you and do what you need to
Mhm.
do. And to be that methodical about, well, you know, what do I want to do that's going to be bold? Like some people would say, well, maybe I'll jump out of a plane. It'll be over in 2 hours, and now I'll go back to my job. I I don't know. Just the idea to upset your life in a way to say, can I still do this? Tell me what was the biggest as you look back on that? I have so many questions on this. Can you let's start with what's a day like when you are an intern in South Africa at a wildlife game reserve?
So basically, what we are, we're part of the ecology team for a game reserve, and so we're living on a base that's in the middle of the reserve, no fences, no walls. I mean, we're just this concrete, very remote base. And if anybody who's listening to this has been on safari and been at a game reserve on safari, that was not our living conditions. That's the guest experience.
There was no
Um,
tent, you mean, with lights twinkling or anything
yeah, no,
lit up?
no, nobody brought us canapes and a bottle of wine. Living in this basically concrete building, dormitory style. So I had a top bunk of a bed with several others of the interns that were there, and there was probably anywhere from 10 to 20 interns there, plus the 5 full-time staff that were there at the period of time. So it was relatively small, but still large enough that you've got several people and dynamics to deal with. Um, and we would get up each morning before 5, um, such that we could actually go out into the reserve, by 5:30 in the morning. And when we would go out in a vehicle. So you're not walking. There's again, there's no fences, but the animals are used to it, kind of the safari vehicle, and so we're in an open air vehicle. Um, and, probably 5 to 7 of us in the vehicle. And we go out at, around 5:30 in the morning out into the bush with the objective of collecting whatever research we were doing that day. And it could be we're doing research on hyenas, and they just had pups. And so we're going by their den to kind of check on the progression of the hyenas. Or it could be we're doing bird surveys to track kind of the different species of birds. So we're going to go out, we're going to count birds that we see, in this particular area. Or it could be we need to track the lions, or we're tracking the rhinos. Or I mean, the day to day, there was different kind of research. But we would go out first, around 5:30 in the morning, be out for about 4 or 5 hours, come back to base, you have breakfast, kind of do, enter data or review camera traps or reports, or sometimes study, get tests and things you had to pass. Um, then we would go back out again around 3 and be out till about, another about 4 or 5 hours, get back 7:30, 8 o'clock at night, have dinner, and then, wash, rinse, repeat, right? We did that 6 days a week. So 8 to 10 hours a day, just out in the bush, um, observing, counting, um, and just being a part of the environment to kind of help, um, you know, kind of understand predator prey relationships, to understand the dynamics of kind of what's going on in the reserve. What is the things that we can do to kind of help understand conservation efforts at a very different level.
What were some of the animals that surprised you? What were some of the things that you now when you look back, you go, "That's something that I can't believe I experienced that." And I mean, what were some of those highlights?
I mean, there's so many, right? I mean, it did take me the first 30 days. I felt like I was in a Disney CGI kind of experience. I couldn't believe that, right there is a tower of giraffe. And like over there is, is a group of the zebras and, the mongoose and the lions and I mean, everything it was just unbelievable because it's a full on game reserve. So you've got the big five plus, all of the other kind of animals there. Um, so a couple things. So one, I have to say anybody who's watched, The Lion King, hyenas got a bad rap. They are the cutest, and they're very under researched, which I didn't know when I went over there. They're very under researched animals. So kind of what their purpose is and what they do. And I learned a ton about the hyenas because we were doing research on them while we were there. They're really matriarchal kind of society. And there's an alpha male and female. They're the only ones that breed. And the females are the ones that the lineage passes down when it goes from pair to the next pair. And the females what it chooses for mate. So it was kind of interesting to learn. And they had pups. And so, I mean, maybe anything is just adorable.
Right.
But they were super curious. And so they would literally come right up to where we were. I mean, obviously you don't, our role is to not interact, right? But they would come right up to where we were and kind of check us out and were really curious. That was a lot of fun just to kind of observe them. Um, Certainly everybody loves the lions. I mean, that's kind of one of the favorites. What I will say is actually 90% of the time the lions were sleeping. So they were a little more boring than I expected. Although there was one time when we were out, and it was at night where the male and female, we had come across the male and female who were mating. Kind of leave that there, I had we got to observe that.
Not
Um,
everybody will see that in their
and everybody's
lifetime.
gets observe that, but the female after they decided to come and walk, you know, from where she was, and she was probably initially like 20 yards away. And we were just sitting and observing and, doing our thing. And she decided to get up and walk past where, the vehicle where I was. And she was so close to me. I literally, if I'd wanted to reach out my hand and pet her on the head. And obviously I didn't do that because I would have not had an arm. But she was literally kind of walking right by and she stopped and she looked up in the vehicle straight into my eyes. And it felt like for an eternity. So female lions are huge.
Mhm.
And, these big yellow eyes. And it felt like she was looking straight into my soul.
Mm.
And I mean, like, there was nothing about me that was hidden at that moment because she saw every single thing about me. And I could like literally feel it in my gut. And I thought, gosh, she's really close. She looks hungry because I'm not sure she's eaten for a few days because that was one of, we could kind of tell fullness rating. And I think she looks a little hungry. And I thought, I mean, if she wanted to, it would be about 3 seconds when she could jump up and grab me out of the vehicle and drag me off and I'd be done. And then I thought, well, it would be fast. There's probably worse ways to go. And gosh, what a story all my friends would have because, hey, I knew Eryn. She was one who got eaten by a lion. So I decided if it was my time, I was actually prepared for it.
You were at
Now,
peace.
she looked at me for probably 5 seconds and moved on. Like I said, it felt like it must have been, it was days that we were standing, we were just there kind of, her looking at me, but then she kind of moved on and it was fine. We were safe. It was not an issue, but it was probably one of the most humbling moments I've had was when she was just, you know, just looking right into my soul.
Wow. Oh, that gives me chills just thinking about that you had that experience. What when you were out there, so I have a huge fear of snakes. I call him Mr. No Shoulders. So did you see any Mr. No Shoulders while you were out there? This is one of the things reasons I don't want to go to Africa, but tell me about that. I just have to ask.
So yeah, I have an unreasonable fear of snakes as well. And that was something I was really worried about going.
Okay.
So a couple of things on that. One is when I was there, summer in the US is winter in South Africa. So it was cold, uh, which I hadn't really thought about and was probably not as prepared for how cold it was when I was there. But just layered up and it was fine. But because of this time of year, there weren't that many snakes out.
That many.
So
There many.
well, so I only really had encounters twice. So once is again part of the internship. They have a reptile center that was about an hour and a half away. That we went there to learn and kind of get information about snakes. And what I did learn while I was there is snakes really want nothing to do with you as much as we want nothing to do with them. When they tend to attack is when they feel threatened. And so what do a lot of people do when they see a snake? They scream, they try to throw something at it. Well, the snake feels threatened, so it's attacked. But it was pretty amazing to observe because they were showing us, all the things they would do, and the snake would just try to go away. So pretty much if you try to go away, it will try to go away too. You just can't corner it or do anything that makes it feel threatened. So that helped me feel a lot more comfortable. And there I did hold a boa constrictor.
What?
Uh, which was, again, it was one of those, am I bold? Right. I just did not want to do it. Everything in my body was telling me not to do it, but I knew they wouldn't have us do it, but wasn't actually safe. And so I did. And I did. And if you see the pictures of me doing it, you can tell my face is like, I'm doing this because I think it's really important to show I can, but this is not a comfortable moment for me. But that was fine. That was in the reptile center. So I only saw one. when I was out in the wild. And I'd only been there about a week. And we were again in the vehicle and a snake went across the front of the road. So of course we stopped because you don't want to kill anything, be a little against being a conservation, intern. We stopped, it went across and then it was over on the side of the road. And again, maybe 10 yards away from me. And it reared up. It was a Mozambique spitting cobra. And so I'm looking at the Mozambique spitting cobra and remembering from what I had learned that, the way that the spitting cobra actually defends itself is it spits into your eyes. Its venom, and it's a very painful, awful kind of death. And so it's looking at us. I'm looking at it. I'm thinking, I have sunglasses on. I think I'm okay. I think I'm a good enough distance away. But I bet he could spit as far as I am if he really wanted to. And so while I'm having that thought, he had reared up, looked at us, decided we weren't a threat, went down, off back into the thing.
Oh,
So that was the only, interaction I had out in the bush with a snake. And it did exactly what we had learned, which is we didn't threaten it. We just stayed still. We just kind of stayed out of its way. It checked us out. Off it went. Not a problem.
so I I want to cry. That's how fearful I am just at thought of this story. Like if I see one live, a Mr. No Shoulders running around me, I just start bawling. It scares me so bad. So I think you are so brave to do what you did. I'd have a couple of quick follow-up questions. 90, listen, 90 days is a long time to be anywhere. Yet, how did that go for you? Was it when was there a moment where you're like, I've got to get the hell out of here? Did you get to drink wine? Was there any restaurants closed? Tell me a little bit more about your eating situation. What was that like?
So we were on the base Monday through Saturday. We had Sundays off, and we're about an hour from town. So, Sundays oftentimes, sometimes we would go into town, but they did have some restaurants there. It wasn't a big town, but it had, some nice restaurants there. So go do that. Um, we did have wine on base. I mean, again, you could buy whatever you wanted to bring on base and, the group worked hard, played hard. So, there were evenings that we would socialize,
Okay.
together. Um, and, after I was there, when you're there for an extended period of time, after your first, 5 weeks, you actually get a leave of absence, or not a leave of absence, um, 5 days off, basically, kind of like a little 5-day vacation in between. Of course, so what did I do on my 5 days off? I went to a game reserve as a guest, so I could see it from the other side of the equation because I was just, so, in many ways, 90 days was exactly the right amount, but not enough, but exactly the right amount. And actually, I was supposed to be there for 2 weeks shorter. I had put 2 weeks. I had the internship, and then I had 2 weeks on the end of it that I was going to go use to just go be a tourist and travel around and kind of see other stuff. And I ended up staying on base for 2 more weeks. And so, because it was such a phenomenal experience. And again, I had so much to learn, you know, um, a lot of, biology to learn, a lot about kind of ecology and conservation. I mean, so there was, I just, I wanted to learn more and to do more and kind of get involved in more. And so, so part of it was just that learning piece. So I'm just so fascinated with what I was learning. Um, second piece was I could tell that I wasn't done yet. And it's hard to kind of say, but my body did not feel ready to leave. And which when I extended it the 2 weeks, I was ready at the end of the time. It was just I just knew that I was still doing that whole kind of reset of my of my brain and my body and how I felt and just kind of that whole kind of wellness journey I was on. I needed a couple more weeks. And so I did extend and ended up not being a tourist at all, other than that little reprieve I had in the middle of the time. Um, but the third piece was just the people I was there with were phenomenal. And again, I look at it, objectively from here and say, you know, it's not people I would ever naturally interact with, right? I mean, I could have been their parent. I'm probably older than most of their parents, right? And so you think about kind of logically speaking, like, these would be people I would normally have in my friend community. And I formed such phenomenal relationships because again, age was sort of an irrelevant thing. Nobody cared. Um, they're just such phenomenal relationships with people there who are going to be lifelong friends. I mean, people I still stay very close and connected to.
Of course.
So 90 days turned out to be, like my time there turned out to be just the right amount of time. Um,
So for people listening, anybody can do this. Like this
Mhm.
is, where would you direct them just to get more information? They would go, is there a website? Where would they go if somebody wanted to go live in Africa for 90 days and be an intern? Where would they go?
Yeah, GVI, just the three letters GVI, Global Vision International. Actually, I'm not even sure. I should probably know what the name of the organization is. GVI.
Okay.
They're an organization based out of the UK. Like and I said, they've got bases tied to all this to a lot of different sustainability goals. So they've got bases in Costa Rica, they've got bases in the Seychelles, they've got bases in Thailand, like South Africa. I mean, so and again, different places focus on different sustainability goals. Um, you don't have to go as an intern; you can go just as a volunteer. There are people who do that as well. So if you wanted to go for a shorter time period, but they've got people. So again, when I was on base there, I was the oldest on base for sure, but I'm not the oldest they've ever had. So I think it's and I know there's other organizations who probably do similar things too, but I strongly encourage people. There's something primal about reconnecting with nature. And it's probably not for everyone. But there is something primal about reconnecting with nature and finding ways to do that, I think is great. Um, and I think I've always been focused around sustainability, but I think I've become much more aware as I've learned. Um, again, I was ignorant in doing things before, and now I'm much more aware of my impact on the earth and the sustainability of the world. And I think all of us have an opportunity to recognize we've got to start doing some things very differently as a people for our world to actually continue. There's a lot more that we're a lot more threatened than we probably realize. And so, whatever people choose to do, I'd encourage you to educate yourself around this whole climate stuff. It is real. There's real impacts happening, and when you start learning a little bit more about it, you can't help but say, "Hey, I want to get involved in any of those ways."
Is there anything specific that you're doing differently because of your time there?
So, I'm probably one of the things, hopefully lots. Um, so one of the things I'm continuing to educate myself. So I've gone back to college, and taking courses in wildlife conservation just because I want to learn more. And I don't know where that's going to take me or what that's going to lead to at some point. But if nothing else, I'm very intrigued and wanting to learn more. So I'm doing that personally. Um, the other is I'm now thinking very differently about what kind of tourist I am. I've always loved travel. I've traveled a lot in my job. I travel a lot personally. I love going to see different places and cultures and all of that. I think I'm going to be a very different consumer about the kind of travel I do and the kind of organizations I travel through because some are very good at recognizing how do we travel in ways that support the local community, the local conservation efforts, kind of whatever kind of, kind of tourist really. And there are things that are very destructive even organizations that call themselves ecotourism aren't always. So I would just encourage people be educated consumers. I'm thinking about what products I buy. I'm thinking about what goes into the products I buy differently. I'm thinking about, like I said, how I travel um, to do things in ways that have the impact on the world I want to have, and not unintentionally um, do things that are actually more destructive than I realize.
Interesting. I'm sure that that is one of those kind of areas that all of us need to for sure need to be better about. And the more you see how it lands, like when you're out in the middle of, South Africa, you see the effects in a different way than you do
Yeah.
here. So from that whole experience, and I just, and first of all, this bracelet that I am wearing now every day, thank you so much. I wear it, and I'm going to tell you what I've thought about since you've given it to me, about being more bold because that was the part of your story, and just, I mean, I think I'm in a super kind of comfortable space, doing a lot of things. Like it's going to make. I'm going to think differently about that. Like I do want to. I'm not gonna hold a snake though, for crying out loud. That is never Mr. No Shoulders, I will never hold one. But what's the big shift that you're in the middle of this shift now, you kind of going back to college, that's huge. What's next? What's something that you are I'm gonna guess that you don't even know because you're like, I'm just open to whatever's gonna happen. But is there something in that you're looking forward to that's
Yeah.
coming out?
Well, so I'd say, I mean, again, one of the things I learned is you're never too old to reinvent yourself. So again, I encourage people to reinvent yourself every 5 years. I'm just made up number, right? But just, and even that reinventing yourself means you continue doing what you've been doing. At least you've gone through the mindset of not allowing yourself to get too comfortable. And I think I allowed myself to get too comfortable. And I think that continually challenging yourself to say, is this really still who I am and still what I want to do? I think is really important. So I'll continue doing. Um, I did go back to work. I know there's a lot of people when I took the leave of absence that were, that, when I showed back up in my office on the day I said I was coming back, they're like, oh, yeah. Like, well, yeah, I said I was coming back, and they're like, well, we really didn't think you would.
What?
Um, you know, I know I really, I am a person of my word. And there's a lot of lessons from this that I find I can actually, even though I went to go do something completely different in a place completely different from where I knew, and in things that were completely different than what I do every day, there's still a lot of lessons to bring back. And so, as we think about sustainability, our company is very focused on sustainability. That's a big part of our business strategy. What I think organizations haven't thought enough about is really the sustainability of your work. And so that's what I'm trying to think about as I come back into my role. Again, talent and inclusion, is my role. And I think there's more we can do to think about how do we create a sustainable workforce, similar to what we talked about with sustainable world, right? Renewable energy. Um, I know there's a lot of people in corporations today that are feeling very burnt out. I worked from 5:30 in the morning until 8 at night, 6 days a week, and I was energized. Right? Why was I energized? Because I was doing something I loved. I felt a real sense of purpose. I felt like I was learning and growing. And by the way, I mean, there were points during the day I took a nap, stepped away, did something else. I mean, but the work I was doing created energy. Um, even though I slept very well at night, right? I created energy. So how do we think about workforces where people can, talk about perform and grow? How about perform, grow, and thrive? That renewable energy, create energy. What is it that we need to do? And I do think, kind of going back, we were talking about earlier around things that have changed, and being much more about kind of employee driven, people driven market out there. And you think about talent. I think there's something about, we can really think about creating sustainable workforces where people can create energy, renewable energy in the way in which they do their work. Um, I think there's something there to the sustainability strategy that a lot of companies probably haven't touched on yet. So I'm looking to how do we do that here in my role I'm in today? I don't know what that means and what it looks like, and I'm really trying to say, what does that mean we need to be thinking about differently um, to bring some of that into the environment?
Oh my gosh. Listen, I am so grateful to have a front row seat to watch that what happens there, and just a huge thank you for sharing your journey with us. I do wonder what's the next journey for you. Do you know yet? Have you already signed up for something next year?
Haven't. Because I just don't know, right? And so I've looked at things, we've got property out in Montana near Glacier National Park. And so I was looking out there, and they were looking for volunteers to work on grizzly bear research. I thought, grizzly bears, that would be fun. But I mean, who knows, right? I think I'm trying to not get too focused. It kind of goes back to my, I've been terrible at career planning, but great at career management. I'm trying to figure out, how do I get myself prepared for whatever comes next? And so when the right opportunity is there, I'm ready. Um, but but not getting overly scripted on, I have to go and do this. Would I love to go back to South Africa and do what I did again? I mean, oh my gosh, so many good friends, so many people who live there who are good friends now. To be back in that environment, I would so love to go back. And this may or may not be the best option, because it's going back to something I've done versus going forward. But who knows? We'll see what the future holds. I don't know yet, but stay tuned.
Well, on that note, that's a good ending point. So I'll just say to the audience, we will stay tuned. We'll do it again soon. And listen, just a giant thank you for our partnership. And I look forward to seeing you again soon. So thanks so much for making some time today.
Thanks, Tracy. It's been wonderful. Appreciate it.